Peter Greenberg's live global travel update is presented to you by Air Canada, connecting the world with more than 1,000 daily flights to 180 destinations and 6 continents.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our latest global travel update from Bayshore, New York on this Friday, the 12th of September. I hope everybody's having a great time on this very crazy week. Of course, we all have been watching the news carefully and diligently about the manhunt in Utah and that terrible tragedy that happened there 2 days ago. It reminds me that this is probably the biggest story in Utah since the story that I covered, also about murder. I dare to tell you it was back in 1976. It was the story of Gary Gilmore. I did the cover story for Newsweek. It ended up becoming a book by Norman Mailer called The Executioner's Song, which ended up becoming a movie with Tommy Lee Jones and Rosanna Arquette. An incredible story of murder, the criminal justice system, and the execution by firing squad in Utah of Gary Gilmore. A lot of memories there today based on what just happened 2 days ago. Speaking of memories, of course, I hope you paused and thought a little bit yesterday at about 8:47 in the morning Eastern time. For those of you who read my posts, I was actually flying yesterday from Chicago to New York on a 6 a.m. flight. And as we were approaching Manhattan, going up the Hudson and then over the East River to get ready to land on runway 31 at LaGuardia, I couldn't help notice that as I looked out my window, it was a beautiful, crisp, clear 20/20 visibility September morning in New York, just as it was on September 11th, 2001. And we all remember where we were then. I certainly remember where I was. And I remember at 8:47 that morning, I was in the green room at the Today Show, about to go on the air live on another story, of course, when they switched to a wide shot of the North Tower of the World Trade Center with the smoke coming out. And Matt Lauer, who was on the air at that moment, said, "It appears that a small plane has crashed into the World Trade Center." I took one look at that photo and realized it could not have been a small plane. I ran down to the control room and said, "Listen, everybody, that was no small plane. This was deliberate because it's 20/20 visibility today." My mother had earlier reminded me years earlier when she was in New York when a plane in the fog actually crashed into the Empire State Building. But that was a different scenario. And as I was explaining why this had to be a big plane, we all watched in horror on all of the screens in the control room as the second plane impacted the South Tower. And our lives were changed forever. I ended up being on the air for the next 21 hours. Of course, we all remember that day where we were, but hopefully all of us always remember not just the lessons that were learned that day, but the lessons that have hopefully been applied from that day as we continue our travels around the United States and around the world. And looking out that window yesterday, the remembrance of the 3,000 lives that were lost that day, 3,000 plus lives that were lost that day in New York and Washington and in Pennsylvania. All right, let's get to the news. I talked about this last week, but it bears repeating about the USDOT rule that was proposed last December in the ending days of the Biden administration, which finally was going to give airline passengers not a complete bill of rights, but rights when their flights were either disrupted, delayed, or canceled when it was deemed under the airline's control. Fair enough. Similar rules already exist. It's called EC Rule 261 in Europe. If your plane is delayed or disrupted or canceled, not because of weather, but because of anything else, they actually come out and write you a check. It's immediate cash compensation, not to mention hotels and food if the situation warrants. They've been in place for a long time. It's done a lot to improve on-time performance in Europe. Well, what about in the U.S.? This is a long time in coming. It was a sliding scale of compensation, anywhere from $200 to more than $750. It didn't just apply to U.S. airlines. It applied to any airline operating from or within the United States, which includes all foreign carriers as well. By the way, the European rule applies to all U.S. carriers operating from Europe. It's a good deal. Well, last week, the U.S. administration of Donald Trump succumbed to airline industry pressure and lobbying and said they weren't going to pursue it. It's no longer on the table. And at the same time, they also agreed to drop another rule that required the airlines to in a fully transparent way, to disclose all the fees you were going to have to pay. At the same time, they quoted you the airfare. So there's no sticker shock and no surprises. That's going away as well. And as I speak, the airlines will never admit this, but I'm telling you right now, they're lobbying heavily to do what? To remove the denied boarding compensation provisions that have been in place for so many years, that if you are taken off a plane on an involuntary basis because they've overbooked the plane, you're entitled to some serious cash compensation. Let's see what happens there. But for the moment, a real setback for consumer protections, and not a good day for airline travelers. All right, let's give you some good news. Here's something that nobody's going to tell you, but I'll tell you. If you're lucky enough to redeem a frequent flyer award and get that ticket, guess what? What the airlines won't tell you, but I will, is that many airlines will allow you, they're not going to volunteer this information, a free stopover on that award ticket, even if it's a one-way award ticket. It just has to be along the way or on the way back. It can't be a huge diversion, but think how much that means to you in terms of your budgeting if you can add another location in without any additional expense. So check with your individual frequent flyer program. Don't expect them to volunteer this information, but most of them will let you do it. Okay. You may wonder, I've been talking about this for a while, that international airfares are coming down. They are. Why is that? Well, look at these numbers. 44% drop in Canadian visitors to the U.S., 38% from Germany, 34% from Denmark, 25% from Spain, 18% from the UK, even 15% from South Korea. That means that there are a lot of empty seats coming here. There are a lot of empty seats going back, and that was for the summer. The figures I just gave you were for the figures that ended in August. We haven't even seen the September figures yet, which of course are going to be down because we're entering the fourth quarter, which is historically and traditionally down. So you're going to see a lot of international airfares plummet. You may not expect to see that with hotel rates, because a lot of hotel general managers have made the decisions they'd much rather operate at 50% occupancy with no discounting than discount and fill the hotel. Now, are they doing that because it's a great economic decision? Well, yeah, but it's an indirect decision based on the fact they still have staffing issues at these hotels. So operating at 50% actually works for them if they can maintain those rates. So just be aware of that. Okay, the miracle flights continue, and with no abatement. Now, they're saying that the Department of Transportation can actually do something about. Here's the way it works. If I call an airline today, any airline in the U.S., and I'm flying out whenever I'm flying out, and I request wheelchair assistance, they provide it. And they do not have any right to ask me why. I don't have to prove my disability or my mobility issue. I just have to request it. And anybody in my party gets to go with me, which means what? I basically get to check in first, I go through security first, and I get to board first. And guess what happens? When that plane lands, this is why we call them miracle flights, and you see all those attendants in the jetway with their wheelchairs waiting to take those quote unquote disabled passengers off, everybody runs off the plane. They can walk. It's a miracle. This is wrong. It's actually a bigger scam now than the old emotional support animal scam. And I think we have to come up with a formula that's fair, that's empathetic, that's sensitive, but that determines who really qualifies for wheelchair assistance. Because in the process of helping all the people who don't need help, we may be seriously disadvantaging the people who do need help. It's a total mess, and it's a scam, and it's got to stop. I see it happen every single flight I'm on, and you do too. Now, speaking of a miracle flight, Alaska Airlines has announced they're going to do nonstop service from Seattle to Reykjavik in Iceland. Pretty cool, right? But what airplane are they going to fly? They're flying it on a 737. You're at the extended maximum range of that airplane. It's a 7-hour flight on a 737. Good luck finding comfort on that puppy. All right, it's 3,622 miles. It's a 7-hour flight in that little small fuselage known as the 737. Whew, I don't know. Let's see how long that one lasts. There are some airlines that realize when you're doing a long haul flight, coach is not the answer. Coach is cruel and unusual punishment. Look at the longest flight in the world, Singapore Airlines, from Singapore to New York. It's about 20 hours, nonstop. How do they configure the plane? There is no coach. They'd have hostages back there. It's premium economy and business. I mean, you need a little bit of comfort. It's 20 hours. I don't care how many movies you want to binge watch. It's still 20 hours. So let's see what happens with our friends at Alaska. Now, when I talk about consumer protections and the fact that the DOT now can't pursue that rule that was proposed by the Biden administration on compensation for flight delays, disruptions, and cancellations that are under the airline's control, let me give you a case in point. One member of my team, Bruce Dante, was flying the other day from Portland, Maine to JFK on JetBlue. And this is a series of lies and miscommunications and misleading information that took a 2 p.m. departure and moved it back to a 6 p.m. departure with about 7 different stories that were fabricated to explain it. But interestingly enough, each one of those reasons that they gave comes under that umbrella of the airline's control and responsibility. And if that rule had been in place, something tells you they would not have delayed that plane because they would not wanted to have paid all that money. So the flight at 2 o'clock, first of all, they said, we have a crew change. I had to wait for a pilot from Boston. That's scheduling. That's not weather. That's the airline's responsibility. Then they said they had a mechanical. Then they said they had to do a tail swap. That means they're replacing another plane. Then they had to get the plane there, not to mention the pilot coming in from Boston. Then they gave Bruce a whopping $12 food voucher that he couldn't even use. No other explanation, no other compensation. But they charged him for an extra bag. Wasn't that special? So this is the stuff we're talking about. In addition to that, the U.S. Department of Justice, in keeping with the Trump's anti-regulation policy, has dropped a suit they would have won against one major airline claiming that this airline had knowingly published a flight schedule that they knew when they published it they could not physically operate. Impossible. But passengers were misled into thinking that the 8 o'clock flight was an 8 o'clock flight when it just did not happen. If you don't have financial consequences for bad behavior, the bad behavior continues unabated. And that's what we're going to see now, as long as that compensation rule is no longer even close to being revitalized or brought back. They just got rid of it. So, I mean, the airlines won in the short term, and we've lost in both the short and the long term as consumers. Just want to share that with you. Then, the bottom line is we do have a voice, and we need to use it. We need to let our elected representatives know. Now, the problem with that is that, remember, we go back to the Deregulation Act of 1978. Congress can't regulate the airlines. They're deregulated. It's the wild, wild west, and there's no sheriff. But, look, every state legislature that has tried to enact a passenger bill of rights, the airlines take them to court claiming they have no jurisdiction. And under the Deregulation Act of 1978, sadly, the airlines are correct. So it's up to Congress and the DOT, really up to the DOT for rulemaking. That's the key here. It's rulemaking, as it is to the FAA for rulemaking when it comes to airline safety, something the FAA has dropped the ball in or ball with for the last 40 years. So let's see what happens there. Okay, now let's go scroll down and say hello to some folks. Linda's saying hi from Naples. Priya's in Chicago, where I was yesterday. Sandra's saying hi. Hello from Uganda at the windy, impenetrable forest. As Sandra knows, I've been there, and there's a reason why they call it the impenetrable forest. Wow, that's where you go to see the mountain gorillas. It's unbelievable. Just as impressive as Rwanda as well. But they call it that reason. They call it that name for a reason. You need to go with a guide and some assistance, not just to get in, but to get out. But an experience you'll never, ever forget. Jim and Harriet always saying hi from Richmond. Lindy saying hi from Ventura. Nice to see you, Lindy. Let's keep going here. Boston Bob saying greetings from Princess Discovery, 7-day cruise to Alaska, currently on the way to Victoria, Canada. Now, if you're like everybody else, you're going to end up going to the Empress for high tea. It's a little overrated. You don't have to do that. But what are you going to see in Victoria? Ask. And you won't be far away from them. Probably one of the greatest pods of orcas ever that hang out there. Get out there and take a tour, do a whale watching tour right there in Victoria. You will not be disappointed. Lorraine is saying hello from Lansing. Okay. Oh, you like the figurines? From Thailand. And they're real. Okay. Barbara's saying today, instead of saying ciao from Louisville, I get to say ciao from Umbria. Congratulations. You're there at the magical time of the year. It's September, so ciao. Camilla's saying cheers from Tucson. Yes, I have photos from our West 56th Street fire escape, seeing massive plume of that day. Putrid smoke, yes. I'll tell you another story that day that happened, and you can't make this up. When I was at the Today Show, we did a lot of stuff out there on the outdoor plaza. And I always went out there before my segment just to see it and to see all the people. And the sound guys at NBC always like to play pranks on us because they had speakers out there. And every once in a while we'd hear a train go by, but there's no train. Or we'd hear, boats. That morning, we heard jet engines. Later, I found out it wasn't the sound guys. It was that first American Airlines plane coming down Manhattan about to impact the North Tower, and we had no idea. Crazy. I'll also tell you that when I finally got off the air that night at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I had not even been outside the building. I was reporting. I was not prepared for what I saw when I got out of the building. I opened the door at Rockefeller Center to get a cab to get back to my hotel. There was not a single vehicle on the street. No cabs, no cars, nothing was moving. There was not a single human being on the streets. It was as if they had evacuated Manhattan and hadn't told me. And so I walked down to Fifth Avenue and then headed north. Not on the sidewalk, down the yellow line, the middle of Fifth Avenue. I was the only one there. I cannot begin to tell you how haunting it was. I couldn't call anybody because we lost all cell phone service when the repeaters went down. I couldn't share it with anybody. And then the most haunting thing of all, many of you know I'm a fireman here in New York. I'll be on duty later today. But the wind had changed. And at that moment, as I walked uptown on Fifth Avenue, the unmistakable smell of burning electrical conduit, jet fuel, kerosene, and I hate to say it, human flesh. Any fireman can tell you what that smells like. You never forget it and you never want to smell it. And I remember that to this moment, 24 years later. It was absolutely crazy. And then for the next 5 days, as nothing flew in the United States, New York transformed itself into operating on slow motion. People were just walking down the street like this. No cab drivers were honking their horns. Nobody was cutting themselves off in traffic. Nobody was moving fast. Everybody was just consumed with their own thoughts and realizing that moment in history that they all experienced in real time, as I'm sure a number of people are doing today in Utah and around the United States as we just experienced that terrible tragedy 2 days ago. In any case, next year is the 25th anniversary. That's almost impossible for me to even measure or fathom. But a quarter of a century later, here we are. Anyway, let's say hello to Mike. He says, was in Okinawa. I see this. Mike was actually in Okinawa and heard Mike, Katie, and Matt say that. They went to commercial, switched to CNN, and saw the plane number 2 hit. I hear you. I was right there. Red saying, watching from Omaha, was just in the UK, used ETA for the first time in E-gates. Didn't the E-gates work great? And Spain, yes, they still stamp, but you know what? Not for long. The European Union countries have made the decision. They're not going to stamp passports very soon after I talk to you. So for all of us sentimentalists who love having stamps on our passport, you better hold on to the ones you have. They are going to become museum pieces. And you say you enjoyed my conversation with Steve from Executive Travel, airfares to Europe so low. This is exactly what I've been saying, and enjoying watching from Omaha. Okay. All right. David says, advice for how to maximize value when using Amex points. Guys, do not get me started on frequent flyer mileage programs or Amex points. But since you asked, David, you know how I use my Amex points? I don't try to transfer them to airlines where I can never get a redemption. That's almost an entirely hopeless endeavor. You know what I use my Amex points for? Buy stuff on Amazon. Use it as a cash back card because that's exactly what the best purpose is, at least for me. We're going to do an in-depth report on our PBS show on all about loyalty and the frequent flyer programs. Stay tuned for that. It'll be in the next couple of months because it'll be a special. And then we're going to run all the numbers for you so you can see exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, Michael says, hello from sunny Lima, Ohio. I just saw you in Chicago 2 days ago. You said when you met in Chicago, you mentioned the other lagoon in Iceland. I did. I'll tell you. Most people go to the Blue Lagoon when they go to Iceland. For me, it's too touristy. The one you want, Michael, is the Sky Lagoon, a much more intimate experience with, I happen to think, much better views. So check it out. Okay. Okay. Hey, Boston Bob says, well, listen, can I share that, Bob? You say celebrating beating cancer. You go, Bob. Okay. Camilla says, cheers from Tucson. Okay, I got that one. And Eddie, thank you for that. Jeff is saying, planning to be in Krakow and Warsaw next June. Can you carry on a Kevlar vest? Please tell me you're not going to do that. If there's no metal on the vest and you're not carrying any weapons, the answer, of course, is you can, but why would you do that? Okay. Mary Jo is saying hello from Pennsylvania. When's the best time to purchase airline tickets to Las Vegas? In January, the second week. Well, here's the cool thing about Las Vegas. Double check. There's one time of the year, and it's usually around the end of the first week of January, so be careful, where they have the Consumer Electronics Show. And basically, they buy out the whole city. It's crazy. And airfares go up accordingly. So go online and find out when the CES is happening, and then book your trip to Vegas around that. Because otherwise, you'll become a victim of a big convention, okay? Barbara's saying hello from Georgia. Ingrid's saying, oh, I don't know what Ingrid's saying, but nice to see you, Ingrid. Michelle is saying, congratulations, Boston Bob. Okay. Camilla's saying, it is atrocious. Imagine how this impacts those who are generally disabled, like my quadruple amputee friend. Shame on these people. I couldn't agree more. And you see it happen on every flight, not just one flight or a number of flights. Somebody is scamming the wheelchair deal on every flight. As one JetBlue gate agent said to me, shaking her head, look, it's Jetway Jesus, because all these people can suddenly walk. It's wrong. Ingrid, I hear you. Mike says, remember the Geico commercial at the airport? The lady says, it's my emotional support snake. Well, you know what? We did the story. Do you guys remember the story I did on CBS? We talked about the emotional support peacocks and snakes. And what we did is I went to a farm in Pennsylvania. We set the whole thing up. I registered for an emotional support animal. I paid $150 to some psychiatrist to claim I needed it or I'd snap. And we rented a pig. And we dressed the pig in this little red emotional support animal vest. And we took that pig everywhere. And we did the piece on CBS called When Pigs Fly. Well, thankfully, that's been diminished now because of rulemaking by the DOT and the FAA. Now let's see what we can do with the miracle flights. Joy is saying, flying to Rome for a cruise next August. Is it cheaper to fly from Philadelphia or New York, or which is the easier to fly from? Well, I don't know right now of any Philadelphia to Rome nonstops. So I'd be careful about that. But you're going in August, they may put on a flight for the summer months. So I'd check that out. If you can go nonstop from Philadelphia, do it. Why would you want to suffer going through JFK? Seriously. Or Newark. But you know that United's got one from Newark. You know that American has a nonstop every day at 5 o'clock from JFK. This is to Fiumicino. And, if you're in Philadelphia, you don't have a lot of bags, then you can take the train right to Newark Airport and go on United. That's what I would do if there's no nonstop from Philadelphia. Okay. Don's saying, went on a great cruise out of Barcelona down the Italian coast. I went to tip my hat to the celebrity cruise ship. Oh, I want to tip my hat to the celebrity folks and every one of their employees. Beautiful ship and 5-star food and tours they set up on shore. Right. You know what? When they do a great job, celebrate them. Right. Remember, we don't have enough of that when it's good. We certainly have enough of it when it's bad. And we hope that they recover. But thank you for those notes, Mr. Buckley. Here we go. Here we go with Miracle Flights. Our good friend Bruce Siegel. Southwest passengers have learned how to get on the plane first with no seating plan. They note wheelchair, have recently counted on a Palm Beach to ISA flight, 36 chairs with families. Over 100 people on board before they paid the A-list, before they boarded the A-list. Okay, you're right, Bruce. This will change when Southwest has assigned seating, but still, it's wrong. Thank you for that report. All right, let's keep going. Don's located in the heart of Illinois, Corn County. Okay. Camilla is saying, I remember 2 years later catching a whiff of a sidewalk subway vent way up on the Upper East Side. Oh, same kind of smell. Yeah. Someone just said we were just at Sky Lagoon 2 months ago, and it was a great experience. Well, thank you. All right. I appreciate that. All right. Moving right along. Let's go to some questions that you guys asked. Here we go. Here's one from Matthew who says, the hijackers learned how to pilot the aircraft. Did they also learn navigation? How are they able to locate the WTC and the Pentagon from altitude? Those landmarks are not easily recognizable. Well, you've come to the right place today because I was the guy who broke that story. I can't tell you how I specifically broke it, but I had a very good source at the FBI, and I actually got him on the phone the day after the hijacking. And where did I find him? In the hijackers' apartments in Florida. I knew what he was doing. He was basically taking out the hard drives from their computers to analyze every message they had in there, who they were talking to, what their chats were like. But then I asked him a question. Tell me something. Is there a joystick there? He said, yeah, there is. I said, go back in. And that's how we found out how they trained. They trained on, then was readily available at CompUSA. Remember that store? Microsoft Flight Simulator 2000. And on that particular version, they had the detailed approaches. I mean, the detailed INS approaches to LaGuardia, to Kennedy, and to Reagan, right? So they had a beeline right up the river or down the river to the World Trade Center, because that's one of the approaches to LaGuardia. They had a beeline to the Pentagon, which is one of the approaches to Washington Reagan. And we don't know if the fourth plane was heading for the Capitol, but we all know where it crashed in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. When we did that, when I found that out, we ran to CompUSA, bought a Microsoft Flight Simulator 2000, went right online, and I found a guy who'd never flown a plane before. And I said, why don't you practice for 10 minutes and fly it into the Pentagon? He did. Fly it into the World Trade Center. He did. So all those hijackers had to do, because they already had their INS waypoints from Microsoft Flight Simulator 2000. So once they seized the cockpit and had access, all they had to do was punch in those waypoints. And then what they needed to do manually was their altitude and their speed. But in terms of the direction, it was a beeline. How horrific is that? And once we went on the air and talked about that, every Microsoft Flight Simulator 2000 was taken off the shelves and now modified, dramatically modified, so that you don't have those INS waypoints and those control paths in any of those simulators. So that's the answer to your question. Anne says, I am traveling to the UK later this month with my sister. She always uses Allianz for her travel insurance. She purchased hers today for $151. I called to sign up and they quoted me $399 for different coverage and would not work with me. We both live in Illinois. How can this be? Well, not knowing the coverage that they described to you, meaning the one that you spent more money on, I can't answer that. But why don't you email me, peter@petergreenberg.com, and give me the specifics of her policy that she bought and the policy that you bought, and we'll get into it. Nancy says, I was reminded of the joy I felt at seeing all the wonders of our planet. I am 80 now and have had various parts replaced as needed. I was just hoping you could recommend a trip that would accommodate my needs for my aching bones and curious brain. By the way, you and I have something in common. I have aching bones and a curious brain, and it doesn't stop me from traveling. So I want you to email me a much more specific question. Don't tell me from my recommendations of where you want to go. Tell me where you want to go, and I'll let you know how to go. Remember, it's not a question of whether you're going to travel, when or if, or even where. It's a question of how. Then we'll figure out the where. Okay? Email me, Nancy. Eunice says, I'll be cruising Celebrity out of Miami on November 23rd. Most flights are $1,000 plus now. Should I wait a little longer for a fare decrease or pull the trigger this week and get my ticket? Well, remember when November 23rd is? You're going to Thanksgiving. That's why they're more expensive now. You might want to consider just alternately look at Fort Lauderdale as opposed to Miami. Look at West Palm as opposed to Miami. Remember, there's Brightline. There's even Orlando. And you might get a cheaper fare than you have to just take the train. But right now, remember, that window of time is right up against Thanksgiving. That's why you're seeing expensive airfares. Charles says, do I need to apply for a new passport or update the existing passport when I move? You do not. As long as you're still a resident of the United States of America, you're fine. When you have to update a passport, it's when it's got less than 6 months of validity or when it's just about to expire anyway, or if you run out of pages, right? In the old days, you could go to any passport office, they'd insert new pages. Those days are over. You're required to get a new passport. So always get, when you do renew, get the 52 pager, not the 24 pager. Even though the passports are valid for 10 years, if you run out of pages, you got to get a new passport no matter when you run out of the pages. Sari says, I know that you will be on WGN tonight. That's in Chicago, but I have to miss it regarding the Frontier tickets. Will that session be able to be heard again? You're talking about the flight pass on Frontier. You know what? Let me get into that next week for you. I'll let you know what it means. I'll be speaking with the chairman of Frontier next week here in New York. I'll get the whole lowdown for you for that. Okay. Stephanie says, I'm traveling to Europe and needing to rent a car to drive through several countries. Do you have a recommendation? I've been searching through the following sites: Auto Europe, Europacar, and Sixt. Sixt appears to have many bad reviews, but when searching, they appear to have a nicer fleet and cheaper rates. You're absolutely right. A lot of people are not happy with Sixt, but you know what? I rent from them as well when I'm in Europe. What you have to watch out for is the permission that they will either give you or not about traveling over borders and where you're going to drop the car off. Make sure that all of that is negotiated in advance, and make sure that you understand tolls and speeding, because you can easily get cited for speeding electronically and not even know it. And next thing you get a bigger bill in your rental car. So find out about drop-off, cross-border travel, which is what you're going to do. But you're right. I like their fleet. And so far, I've liked their service, even though they don't get so many great reviews. Okay. Let's go to the photo of the week. We love this for a reason I'm going to tell you. Look at that picture. I was just there 5 days ago. Anyone want to tell me where that is? In one of the most beautiful states in America, especially at this time of the year. We do a show called Hidden. We do it all over the world. We have Hidden Malta premiering. We have Hidden Alabama premiering. I'll give you that in a second. We just finished shooting Hidden Egypt and Hidden Hong Kong. We just finished shooting Hidden Maine. That's the aerial shot of Camden, Maine, taken by Jonathan Atkin, one of our pals. Jonathan, thanks for sending it in. Such a beautiful state, such a beautiful harbor. And what's amazing about that harbor is here we are in 2025. Everybody's got a modern boat. No, what I love about Maine It's the classic design. It's the lobster boats. It's the wooden boats. It's the schooners. It's the windjammers that still ply the coast. So, Jonathan, thank you for reminding us of how beautiful it is from the air and on the water. If you think you got a photo that qualifies as the photo of the week, you know what to do. It's photo contest at petergreenberg.com. And if we agree that it works, guess what? It goes right up there next to Jonathan's. One little housekeeping note. I got two. Hidden Alabama is premiering soon. I want you to see a little bit of a tease. Get ready to discover the unknown dimensions of a U.S. state. We'll take you from the swamps, to the stars, to find the creative spirit that defines so much of American music, as well as the stories of the real field of dreams and a trail that shaped the conscience of a nation. I'm Peter Greenberg, and welcome to Hidden Alabama. That'll be next month. Check your local listings for PBS. And of course, right after that, streaming on Amazon Prime, Apple TV, and YouTube. A little other housekeeping note, our radio show tomorrow at Saturday from 10:05 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Also streaming live on our website, petergreenberg.com. It's coming to you from South Coast, Jamaica at Sandals. I go there for the annual summit for the Caribbean for the American Society of Travel Advisors. And I'll be in conversations with the ministers of tourism from 7 different countries talking about trade wars, tariff wars, airfares, airlift, and the passenger and traveler experience. I hope you'll join me there. And of course, we always answer your questions on the air. So check in tomorrow, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. I want to thank Anthony Protus Chung for doing the boards today. You're never going to guess where he is. So I'm going to tell you, talking about technology. He's handling all this from Tahiti. And no, he's not on vacation. He's on our advanced team for our next show that we're shooting next month called Hidden Tahiti. Aching bones, curious brain. I'm traveling, and I hope you will too. We'll see you next week, everybody, with another edition of Global Travel Update. We'll let you know when and where. Just check the emails. Check our website, petergreenberg.com. Have a great weekend. See you on the radio tomorrow.
Peter Greenberg's live global travel update is presented to you by Air Canada, connecting the world with more than 1,000 daily flights to 180 destinations and 6 continents.